Greetings, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. We have a great topic today, and I'm really excited about the webinar. Ransomware reality, dispelling some myths. Hopefully, we're able to shatter some myths for you today. And just, our intention, I think, is when you leave the webinar today, that you'll have a really good sense for not just what ransomware is, but how it operates, how the bad guys think, and how we can help you prevent it in the long run and in the short run, I guess. So anyway, joining me today is Tim Smoot from Arctic Wolf. Tim, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Tim, I'm really excited about the topic and really excited to bring your expertise to the table, and just really want to make an impact to the attendees today. So thank you for that. Here's what we're going to talk about. We'll spend a little bit of time telling you some background about ransomware. Some of these things you know, some of them maybe you don't. But then I want to talk about specifically, what are good goals really from preventing and dealing with ransomware, and then also this package that we've put together. What is it? What's it included, and how does it address these challenges? So. Without further ado, I think we'll jump right in. Actually, I did have a couple house cleaning items that I should share with everyone first. If you have questions, you should see a Q&A box. And if you just enter your questions in there, we'll receive all those. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to go through all the questions, and everybody will be able to hear the answers, and we'll have a dedicated time for that. So at the end, we'll collect them for the end. But in any event, let's get started. So, Tim, first pop quiz of the day: is ransomware still a thing? What do you think?
That's a resounding yes, unfortunately.
It's a resounding what? Yeah.
It would very much be a positive thing if we could say it was completely eliminated. I think in the long run, we'll probably, as time goes on, we'll see ransomware pick up more and more, and there'll be different methodologies, different ways of deploying it, different ways of addressing it. The list goes on. And then hopefully at some point it'll turn into much like the whole virus world, right? Where every once in a while a virus will float around, but by and large, everybody is pretty well protected against it. But the difference between ransomware and virus is the reality is most viruses were just destructive, right? There wasn't very many of them, or any that is broadly known of, that was leveraged as a business or a money-making tool. Coincidentally, our friends that do the malware it's quite the opposite, right? It's actually a business. So as you can see here in this slide, this is from 2021. There's a couple of different resources that we pulled from to gather this, but there's a few things that really come to the front of mind and everyone should focus on. Probably the one that jumps into mind goes back to the previous question: is it still a thing? And as you can see in the latter months of last year, we don't have the December numbers yet, but I'm sure they're going to be just as doomy and gloomy as the October and November ones were. I guess September was kind of bad as well. But long story short, yes, it is still a thing, and it certainly is not going away anytime soon. The other part of that is it's getting more flavors, right? There's new ways of deploying it, new varieties, and things of that nature. And last and certainly not least, it's not just healthcare, it's not just manufacturing, it's not just legal. It's pretty much every industry. So every vertical is a target.
Yep. And I think that's one of the key points about this slide that's worth mentioning, and hopefully everyone, can leave with a good sense for this. There isn't really anyone who's not a target, right? The bad guys just want to make money. When it comes to ransomware, pay me the ransom. So if the bad guys can figure out a way that, they can take what's valuable to you or encrypt it, right? But stealing data is a common thing. So I think, to your point, what's important to understand is that it's evolving and it's continuously changing. So that makes it very, very difficult to, protect against, but it applies to everybody, right? And I think that shows up in the numbers. Here's a quote that came in that I think is very interesting. And, it's obviously from 2019, right? Every 14 seconds, there was a ransomware attack in 2019. And by 2021, which, believe it or not, Tim, we're in, which is still mind-boggling to me. But every 11 seconds, a ransomware attack. That's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That's almost 8,000 attacks a day, right? It's over 2.8 million attacks per year. It's a lot of ransomware going. What do you think about that?
And that brings to mind a really important part of this whole discussion is, we hear about the here and there organization that's fallen victim to this on the news, right? But if we do that math and we see that, we're really talking about millions of attacks, it's not just the ones we hear about in the news. So as we consider and we think about this overall issue, a couple of things come to mind with respect to the fact that you don't hear about every person that gets attacked. One of those is the fact that obviously not everyone's going to announce from the rooftops that they've fallen victim to ransomware. But secondarily, there's a lot of folks that don't make it through that ransomware recovery from an organizational and a business standpoint, right? So there's kind of some read between the lines information in this quote that are every bit as relevant as the quote itself.
Yep, that's right. And what's interesting, what's not mentioned in this particular quote and some of the other, if you dig a little bit deeper, the financial impact related to ransomware, $20 billion. $20 billion in 1 year attributed to ransomware specifically. It's just mind-blowing when you think about it in those terms. So what is it? I mean, what is ransomware?
Well, it's honestly one of those things that was developed by a good guy, right? A way or a thought process of protecting data to keep it out of nefarious hands, or to protect it if it did get into nefarious hands. You encrypt it and prevent folks from being able to see it if they don't have the appropriate key information. Obviously, anything that is good can very quickly and very easily be turned into something bad. So by and large, encryption software has been around for a very, very long time. A lot of folks leverage it even on a day-to-day basis for protecting their company's data. Things like BitLocker and a few of the other common names out there that do encryption. A lot of our storage arrays now encrypt data at rest. So, encryption is not something that is only on the bad guys list. However, the bad guys have twisted it and turned it into something that can be delivered in a payload very, very efficiently, very easily. And in doing so, they can infect organizations and then prevent them from having access to their data. Or more importantly, as you mentioned, Steve, they not only prevent them from having access to their data, but they're exfiltrating a certain amount of it as well to use as leverage in order to get the payment that they're looking for. So, it's a complicated discussion, honestly speaking, when we think about ransomware from a business aspect. And that's not only from the nefarious actor side, but also from the person that's being attacked. There's a lot of stress that goes along with, the fact that now you can't access very important data. There's a lot of personal repercussions from a reputation standpoint that go along with it. But by and large, the folks that are sending these out are, as it says down there at the bottom, that last point, there's no thought process behind it. A lot of times they'll attack a completely random set of people. So it's maybe not even an exact same vertical list that they're working off of. But the bad news is that it doesn't take a big investment for these bad folks to get this stuff sprayed out there. You know, somebody clicks on it, their job is done. They literally don't have to do any work at all. They just wait for the actual ransomware agent to call back and say, "Hey, I'm deployed. What do you want me to do now?" And then they start the timer on the things they want to do.
Yep. I think one of the interesting things for me on this slide was the Bitcoin. You know, down at the bottom, it shows what the Bitcoin account is and those kind of things. And I think digital currency, and specifically Bitcoin, was kind of a key to the explosive growth of ransomware that we've seen. You know, it happened before Bitcoin for sure, but I think it became real commonplace and pervasive as a result of Bitcoin, just because it's such a secure way to get paid, right? without giving up your identity, right? Which is key for a bad guy, if you can imagine. You mentioned something, Tim, that I think is critically important for people to understand, and that is that it's a spray mechanism, right? So these bad guys, they can buy exploit kits on the dark web, which include, you know, step-by-step how-to for all of these techniques, and then just scan the internet for looking for, you know, known vulnerabilities, for example. We'll talk more about that later, but scan the internet looking for known vulnerabilities and then just go after whoever has one, right? Which is obviously going to be across all verticals. It's not. So it's a scary time as it relates to ransomware. And part of the reason is just because it's easy to do, right? And B is because, you know, from an exploitation standpoint, people are looking for the easy way in, and it's not hard to find, right? It's not, if you scan the entire internet looking for open RDP ports, for example, you're probably going to get some hits, and then just go after those guys, right? So anyway,
yeah. And
I'm sorry.
I was going to add one more point there. You know, your point is completely relevant from that standpoint. Or they can spend $10 and get an already curated list, right? They don't have to do the scanning themselves. They can just spend $10 for a list that someone's already compiled. So right. You know, the bad guys are in support of bad guys, I guess is what I'm trying to allude to there.
Yep. There actually, one thing worth noting, and this cues off a little bit of what you said, Tim. Over 500 known ransomware families, and this is a key thing to consider as well when you think about how ransomware is made and what it's made up of. First of all, the bad guys have all the same tools as the good guys, right? So we talk about using artificial intelligence and machine learning to better protect ourselves from ransomware, but the bad guys are also using artificial intelligence and machine learning to change variants more quickly and basically, hide their ransomware, quite honestly, right? Or develop a new strain of the same thing. But it's an interesting dilemma. This timeline is from 2016. It's from Carbon Black, but it paints a pretty good picture of the evolution, I think, of ransomware. And the most current years aren't on here. But anything to reflect on this, Tim?
Yeah, and this is really kind of brought to bear to help people understand the fact that we're not looking at the same old critter over and over again, right? And this brings, to the front of the mind the fact that there's no such thing as completely protected or impenetrable or any of those kind of things. 0 days or patient zero, whichever phrasing you want to allocate to that. Applies to the ransomware topic as well, because as you mentioned, the new flavors come out and they have completely different deployment mechanisms. A lot of them are something email related. That's a very, very common way. There are others that are website related. There are some that are being delivered via things like Facebook and games on your mobile phones and your tablets. So these guys are extremely creative. And I don't want to pass up the reality of these past few weeks and a couple months of the fact that they've stepped up their game considerably, right? They're investing time and very, very extreme technical talent to penetrate folks like SolarWinds and things of that nature, to have another gateway to be able to bypass some of the things that we've put in place from a cybersecurity protection standpoint. So we can never assume that the door is completely closed, because these folks have made a huge investment in making sure that they're still available or capable, I guess is the better word to use there. One last thing that you brought up, and I just thought of it, just bounced off my brain. You mentioned Bitcoin being the kind of the increased mechanism that brought ransomware into the forefront there because of the easy payment. Bitcoin was also something that was intended to be a good thing. It was supposed to bring anonymity, which I think most of us knew was going to be used a little bit bad from the giddy up anyway. But the point is that it was supposed to be a good thing. It wasn't supposed to be a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, we could spend the rest of the hour philosophizing on how good things end up in the wrong hands, right? Comic
Amen.
Books and movies made out of these stories forever. But that's I think a key to remember when it comes to like what is ransomware. I think most of our audience is acutely aware of what ransomware is, but really anything that's malicious intent that tries to put you in a position where you'll pay money to make the pain stop, right? That's really
right.
Ransomware. And I think the deployment methods have been primarily around encryption of your data. And for most businesses, if you encrypt sensitive data, you can't really do business, right? But and today, the bad guys are trying to make it more likely that you will pay than that you won't. And they're doing that by saying, sometimes they say, hey, we encrypted your data. And then, somebody will say, go pound salt. I'm going to recover my data. And they say, well, hold on, because we also stole a bunch of it and we're going to release it on the internet if you don't pay the ransom. And that's scary, especially if you're in a regulated industry. So it's interesting and it's a scary time. So ransomware today, what do you think, Tim? What do you think about ransomware today?
Yeah, I think the three biggest things that come to the front of my mind is first of all, you literally just scrape the surface of it, and I'll go in just a slight bit more detail there. These bad guys, again, have the same tools that we have on the good guy side. They also know what as an organization, what your typical procedure or mechanism would be to recover from downtime, right? So in most cases, that means I'm going to go to my backups. These guys, a lot of times, will penetrate an organization. They'll stay silent, and they will find your backups and encrypt those first. And then they move on to something that you notice, right? They start encrypting files on your file server and your day-to-day operations. And then somebody in the organization says, hey, I can't access my files. Now you know you're encrypted, or the little pop-up that we saw a couple slides ago comes up on one of those people's desktops and says, hey, you're encrypted. We need the Bitcoin to get the key, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that they realized, hey, our success rate's going to be exponentially lower if we continue to ignore the fact that people can restore from backups. When we talk about things like Veeam and Cohesity and any number of other newer and virtualized type backup solutions, you can have a server back up in a matter of seconds, and it can be from minutes ago. So the pain and suffering that goes along with that is drastically reduced comparative to what it would have been, 5 to 8 years ago. So these guys have adapted to that. They recognize that that's a reality. So they're spending development effort, intelligence effort, and things of that nature to make sure they recognize and encrypt the things that prevent that organization that they've attacked from pivoting. Right? They're doing their level best to make it a sure thing, I guess, is what I would say there.
Yeah.
The second thing is I cannot harp enough on the fact that, you know, the cost side of the coin certainly is monetarily impacted. I get that. But really, the reputation cost can be the one that hurts the most. When you look at how businesses work with each other today, a lot of businesses, whether they be partners or vendors, are very well integrated. Even customers, to a certain degree, are very well integrated with their suppliers. So when you have to admit to your customer base or to your partner community that you've been hit by ransomware, the immediate assumption is that you did something wrong. It doesn't matter whether it's relevant or not, but the immediate assumption is that you did. And the problem there is that the reputation cost now means you may or may not be in the same position you were before with those people. And that's unfortunate because a lot of the times the people that are pointing fingers at you because you got hit by ransomware have been hit themselves, or they're on a target list and they're going to get hit in the near future. But it still doesn't erase the fact that the reputation side of it is very painful. The third one we've spoken to already, but it's really something that folks need to keep in the front of their minds. Is first and foremost, there's literally no industry that they're not going after. Everybody is a target. I've had an Arctic Wolf. We've got obviously every vertical under the sun, but we've seen trucking companies and manufacturing firms both get hit with ransomware as part of our discussions with potential customers. Those two would probably be the last that I would think of on the list that a ransom type situation would be something they would have to face. The other side of it is that the changes and the evolution of these, not only the development of the new ransomware tactics, but also the delivery mechanisms is exponential. Like you can't even imagine what the next way they're going to get to us is. So we must remain vigilant. We must remain protected and keep our eyes open.
Yep. Roger that. So what really occurred to me as you were talking, Tim, and you started out by talking about everything that the ransomware guy, the bad guy, has to go through to really, kind of tie your hands together and make sure that you pay. Right? They put a lot of time and effort into that. And I think the key point there is it takes a lot of time to be able to do that, to navigate through inside your network and find the data that is most likely to result in a payment. And, the stat on the slide is 9.6 days of downtime, but there's also a stat that says the average time that it takes to detect an intruder. In 2019, it was 206 days. Can you imagine having a bad guy on your network for 206 days and not knowing it, right? And all the damage that they could cause you if they had that amount of time to really look around. It's phenomenal, and it takes time to accomplish these things. So detecting them early, I think, is a key. Is a key. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, we talk about the ransomware payment specifically. It's increased phenomenally, and at least doubled year over year, right? But the for large enterprises, the average is a lot higher than that. For one, right, like $111,000. But the average cost to recover, to your point, is way more than just the ransom, right? The average cost to recover $84,000 across all industries, across all businesses, so both small and large businesses. If you average them all together, $84,000. It's phenomenal. It's doubled, basically. And it will continue to grow at that rate. And then the other thing that I think from a state of ransomware standpoint that is very interesting from this perspective is the sophistication of the ransomware guys. And from a skill set standpoint, the really skilled attackers are now, getting off the front page, right? And they're more likely to build exploit kits and sell them on the dark web and make their money that way, and let the young guns, if you will, right, the people who are less skilled, do the actual ransomware and put themselves at risk, quite honestly, right, as bad guys. If they get caught, penalties are huge. But they're both ends of the spectrum. We're seeing attacks happen from very, very skilled attackers who have very targeted attacks and very advanced exploits, and then very unskilled attackers, right? Anyway, it's interesting, and it's a tough battle, quite honestly. So what does a ransomware attack look like anyway, Tim?
Yeah, this is obviously the most common and the most simplistic form of ransomware. And before I dig into this, I want everybody to not think in context of people being bad from your side, the business side of the good guys, whether they be the end users or the IT teams or the C-level folks. This isn't a resounding "you failed" type scenario. Okay, I've been doing this kind of stuff for a really long time. Prior to that, I was in the infrastructure side of the business, and prior to that, I managed a credit union data center for 10 years. You can do all the planning and all of the prevention and all of that you want to, but the reality is if you still need to do business, which is surfing the web and sending and receiving emails and leveraging file transfer and all that kind of stuff, if you still have that kind of stuff going on, you're susceptible. So long story short, there's not a way to completely eliminate that door being open slightly, right? We can train all of our end users all we want to about how to recognize phishing emails. We can tell them, be careful with your USB keys, and we can tell them to lock their desktops, and we can tell them don't let anybody tailgate when they come into the organization. And we can rest assured that by and large, most people are going to do their level best to implement those recommendations and guidelines. But the bad guys are really good at what they do. We've said that about a dozen times now, right? But this example here is really the simplistic and most common form, which is an email type attack. So effectively, the user receives an email, whether it has a link for them to go to fill out a survey that looks completely innocuous. It could ask for credentials as well as a submit button to verify that they still work at the organization, or that they've received a recent ransomware training email that somebody has let slip. That I'm getting tired of seeing these emails on Facebook, and then the bad guys read that post, and boom, now they know a great way to attack you. Social engineering is typically a huge part of a lot of these attacks, and people don't recognize that, but it's true. Long story short, that whatever they are doing has somehow given them the ability to click on something. And in the process of clicking on that, a very small, very simple, very easy client install happens in the background. It could include things like elevated privileges. It could include things like asking for permissions to view their pictures or something like that. Things that people are used to seeing and are okay doing, right? Oh yeah, I've seen that. It must be a new app I installed on my iPhone. Boom, yes, accept that change. Which they're piggybacking on that permission acceptance, and now they've installed the bad thing. After that, they're kind of the bad guy there that you see at the top. He's kind of going out across the network, and he's starting to look for what he can do and what he can't do. He's starting to look for weaknesses in your administrative implementations, things on your Active Directory infrastructure, things maybe on an appliance or a printer or a scanner that aren't locked down. Once he gets that ability, now he's leveraging that functionality to promote and get more permissions, so now he can start encrypting very important files like your backups and things on your file server and other things. And then eventually something happens, whether he stubs his toe and somebody recognizes it, or that ransomware notification pops up and says you've been encrypted and now it's time to pay us some money. It seems pretty long and drawn out and difficult, but we're talking about the majority of this happening in a matter of minutes, maybe hours tops. And they're doing it in such a way that unless you're looking at a unified actionable data set of log data, you're probably going to miss it. You know, somebody looking at just a firewall probably isn't going to catch this because the command and control stuff isn't happening until after the encryption has begun, right? In most cases, they put a sleeper on it that says, find out what you can, get your elevated permissions, do you this, do that, and then reach out to me and I'll tell you what to do next, right? So the common things that people look at are typically things that don't raise the red flag, right? Your networking traffic, your firewall traffic, your login traffic, all of that stuff is for the most part completely innocuous. What they're doing looks like normal traffic, so it's very difficult to see it. Yep.
Yeah, and the other thing, Tim, I think that's worth noting is, you know, if somebody clicks on an email at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, the bad guys are probably going to wait until after 5 to start doing all of those command and control contacts and all of that network traffic, because they likely already know something about your business. Or, you know, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But in any event, late on a Friday is a very common time for ransomware, for an attacker to launch an attack like this. So you can download a payload that sits idle until non-business hours later in the day or over the weekend or what have you, and then all the bad things start to happen then when you're less likely to have eyes on the store, quite honestly. And one of the things that I wanted to add to this is that today, in today's world, and this is very common that this is happening, right? The bad guys want to get paid, and so they're trying to do everything in their power to make sure that you pay the ransom, quite honestly, right? So that said, a lot of times coupled with encrypting all of your data is exfiltrating your data and holding you ransom that way. So it's a scary world for sure. I just wanted to share, Tim, that personally, my philosophy on paying ransom has changed, right? And I think I get asked this question a lot, should I pay the ransom? And I just wanted to share a little bit about that because I think everybody knows from movies or reality or whatever the case that the FBI is adamantly against, or has been historically adamantly against, paying ransoms for anything, right? Don't negotiate with the bad guys. Don't pay them any money. Don't do this. Don't do that. And I think I kind of my perspective was in that camp. Don't pay the bad guys ransom. And primarily the reason was the thinking that if you pay the ransom, you're going to end up on a list. These guys pay the ransom. Let's go after some more, right? Because there's a high likelihood that they're going to pay, confirmed by the fact that they already did, right? But I shifted that perspective a little bit. Now I think of it more as a business decision, because it is, quite honestly, right? Because ransomware is affecting our businesses as a whole. And so it's a business decision whether you pay the ransom or whether you don't pay the ransom. Sometimes maybe the right answer is yes. Maybe sometimes the right answer is no. And I think it depends on, you know, what kind of preparation you've done, how long is it going to take you to restore your business, what kind of a hit am I going to take from a reputation standpoint, did they get any data, are they going to release data, all those other things. I think that they all have to be considered, right? And so what I've kind of shifted our corporate objective as it relates to ransomware, specifically to our job as a trusted partner, being put people in a position where not paying the ransom is a better business decision than paying the ransom, right? Not only a better one, but the best one, right? That's exactly. It should be a no-brainer, right? I would love everybody to be able to say no to these guys. I think ransomware goes away if it stops being a revenue stream for the bad guys, right? But right now, I don't think we're ready for that. So that we have to take some steps to get there. But I think that's at least that's our goal, right? Is to put people in a position where not paying the ransom is a better business decision than paying the ransom. Any comment?
So yeah, that integrates well with the talk track of, look, if we recognize the fact that the door is always kind of jarred to ajar to a certain degree, the plain and simple fact is we've done everything that we can do to make sure that it's closed. There are ways that we have to leave it open, right? At the same time, if we acknowledge the fact that it is ajar and we know why it's ajar, and we do the most effective protections against that requirement of it being ajar, and then to your point, recognizing that if something does go completely wrong, the reality is if I recognize it quickly, I can take an incident and prevent it from being an issue. And that's really the focus. We really want to do that quick recognition, recognizing the fact it might get in the house. There's literally no reason because of what we've prepared for and what we've done from a due diligence standpoint and cybersecurity configuration and methodology on security posture. We really have established that reality that there may be an incident, but it doesn't have to be a business impacting issue.
Yep. And I see we had a question come in, Tim, and I'm going to address it now just because I think it's relevant to this slide. And the question is, hasn't there recently been legislation that could make paying the ransom illegal for the victim? And that is absolutely a fact, right? And more than that, right, to pour wound on the salt, you could get fined for paying a ransom. If it's to OFAC is the governmental organization that makes it illegal to pay certain individuals or organizations or governments for that matter. And if you end up paying the ransom to an attacker that is on that list, then absolutely it's illegal. So there is a key element here that's worth noting, is that knowing the difference is important too, and that wasn't the intention. That isn't how we intend to position people to make not pay the ransom the right answer, right? But it is a valid point in that it could add injury to insult, right? That you not only get hit with ransomware, but now you get fined by your own government because you pay the ransom to get back in business. So very, very great question. Thank you.
And we spoke a little bit about it before, but I'll go ahead and add it because it should honestly maybe even be part of this. This exact quote is, if you do find yourself as an organization in that position where it just seems like paying the ransom is the most business relevant way of getting over the issue. And again, I 100% believe that if we do our jobs, we can prevent that from being a reality. But if you do, there are some gotchas that go along with it, right? The first of which obviously is this situation where you very well could be in big trouble with the government for paying ransom. The second of which is the bad guys evolve. And one of the ways they've evolved is they've said, thank you for paying your $35,000 in Bitcoin. Oh, by the way, I'm still not going to give you the key. The third methodology is, yes, thank you for paying your Bitcoin. Here is 75% of your information. If you want the rest of it, here's another bill. Right. And then the last and probably the one that we've mentioned already is the enforcement side of the coin, where you have taken the government's advice or the FBI's advice. You have taken ASMGi and Arctic Wolf's advice, and you say, I'm not going to pay the ransom. And then they hit another command and control button that disintegrates all the data on your network. So the uninstall of their ransomware product is the destruction of everything that it has impacted. So those gotchas are real. There's no way of dancing around them. They truly are there. And should be part of that decision process.
Yep, awesome. So I just want to note, Tim, we're it's 2:40, so we'll pick it up a little bit on the pace. But I want to spend some time speaking about, okay, so not what is ransomware and how does it happen and all that, but how do we stop it, right? How do we prevent it? And so what I wanted to focus on were three goals of fighting ransomware. First and foremost is prevent it from happening to begin with, right? So that's a great target. Minimize the impact if you are attacked. So, and what I mean by this, if you do get compromised and somebody clicks on a link for an email or whatever happens, right? Minimize the impact to the business. So we'll talk more about this later, but isolate that device, right? So now, even if they download a payload and encrypt everything, it's only on that laptop or that desktop. It's not on the entire network, right? So, and then the third thing is have a structured plan for doing incident response. And this really addresses a lot of the things that we talked about in the previous slide, right? It's a great way to make sure you don't get yourself in trouble, in more trouble, I should say, right? Because you're already in trouble if your business, if you're thinking about paying the ransom, you're probably already in trouble. How do you prevent yourself from getting in more trouble? And that's to have a structured plan and a rehearse. That means do a tabletop exercise on incident response so that you're absolutely certain of whose role and whose responsibility in those things. So I'm going to keep on moving, Tim, but I wanted to just have you reflect on this a little bit pretty quickly if you can. I like the way that you talk about proactive and reactive and active components of a strategy.
Yeah, that's really simple. If we think about the majority of the reality of cybersecurity in today's world, most folks have done a pretty decent job of doing the proactive approach, right? They've got some kind of a patch management solution in place. They're looking for vulnerabilities. They're doing, paying for folks to do, vulnerability scans and that type of stuff. Again, they've done a lot of the reactive talk track, which is, they're looking at firewall logs. They're checking and making sure that they're not transferring wrong information, via web filters and all that kind of stuff. But probably the one that most folks, stub their toe on or stumble on is the active component. Now, it's not about somebody doing something wrong. Again, I'll say that. It's a lot of work, and more importantly, it's very difficult to know what you're looking at when it's coming at you. And third, and certainly not least in that, is when I look at every piece of information disparate and individualistic of itself, I may not see something. So being able to look at all that data in an actionable, unified data set really gives me the ability to be much more diligent on both the proactive and the reactive side, and that would be the active component of security. So think of cybersecurity for an organization as a triangle. Without one of those pieces, there's going to be trouble.
Yeah, nice. I like it. And then just some examples of what fall into each of those buckets, Tim.
Yeah, we already mentioned the risk or risk management type solution with respect to proactive, whether that's a patch management tool or a vulnerability scanner, whatever the case may be there. Some of those would be a risk or managed risk solution or an intrusion prevention detection type solution. The reactive side would be a tool or a service like managed detection and response, right? So watching the things that are going on to see indicators of compromise, and then intrusion detection systems, things like that. And then when we think about the active component, it's not just tools like a SIM or a multi-factor authentication tool. It's actually people that are watching and the people that know what they're looking at while they're watching.
Yeah. And I think that's a critical piece. And we say it a little bit differently, but I think it's very, very similar. Maybe that's why I like those slides so much, by the way. But I'll cut to the chase on this slide a little bit. This one team program that we're talking about today is designed, to help you with things like ransomware or any attack or data breach or those kind of things. But we have a saying about at ASMGi about a total solution. And this one team program that we're talking about it's a total solution, and the components are a program, which is more of the strategic side, right? And the technology and the operations. And operations encompasses a lot of different things, but you actually have to do it. The point I try to make is that you have to do this. Like tomorrow, when you show up for work, somebody has to do certain things, right? So defining the program, what needs to be done, make sure that you have technology as an assistant to get things done, but build an operating model, operationalize all of these things to actually get them done, right? And I think that's a key element when we start breaking down each of those pieces. And I won't go through this slide in general, but the program basically defines the things that are most important to those operations and that technology, like the corporate objectives and the SLAs and SLOs and those kind of things. And the technology obviously has to support those, and so does the operations, right? They have to be designed to support that. And so, as you said, they have to encompass a proactive, a reactive, and an active component, or it's not really a total solution. So I want to keep moving because one of the things that this One Team Mdrm SOC Plus program that's powered by Arctic Wolf, it's really a collaboration and a very collaborative effort, but it's designed to help with things like ransomware. And specifically, as it relates to that, the goals of the One Team Mdrm SOC Plus program is exactly like we talked about before, right? These goals are, number one, to prevent ransomware attacks from happening at all. So imagine being able to take it completely off the table from happening at all. Two, if something bad is going to happen, then minimize the impact to your business, right? Don't make it put the lights out for you, right? Just minimize the impact, and we have mechanisms in place to ensure that that's. And then rehearse again, if something bad is going to happen, make sure that you don't make it worse by your actions. A lot of people delete evidence, right? They just try to clean up the mess, and all of the evidence is, kind of the baby going out with the bathwater kind of mentality, right? Just moving forward for the purpose of getting their business back operational, which is critically important, there's no question. But just make sure you do the right things in the incident response, including who you pay ransoms to. And that's a key point today. So I wanted to highlight that. So I want to drill in a little bit to what is the Mdrm SOC program. And I want to make sure that I save time for questions because we got a bunch of them coming in. So the 24/7 Security Operations Center, absolutely paramount. And so I say this all the time, Tim, and I'm going to ask you for your thoughts on this, but having somebody watch the store every minute of every day is critically important. Ransomware attacks a lot of times happen after hours or over weekends or on holidays. And if somebody's watching, to look for indicators of compromise at those off times, it's often paramount that that's happening in order to stop this continuously. The MDR piece, just doing that continuously, 24/7. Once again, just detecting IOCs going off. If you see an intruder on your network, we're going to know about it, right? And we're going to be able to take action immediately instead of 206 days later or 9 days later. We're going to take action right now. So continuously managing risk. So the vulnerability management scanners are going continuously. So if a new vulnerability shows up, we as soon as the scanners know about it, we know about it, right? So that's it's fantastic, and there's so much more encompassed in that managed risk service. But managed cloud monitoring, and again, I can't emphasize enough, this is such a critical piece because so much of our businesses are migrating to the cloud, not just email with Office 365, but also AWS servers and Azure servers. And how many data breaches have we seen that have been caused by misconfigurations and those kind of things? So the ability to look for those real time continuously is outstanding, and it's actually paramount in order to prevent bad things from happening. Comments on that, Tim?
Yeah, the big word that we're dancing around here by putting the word continuous up there is scheduled, right? You can't really address cybersecurity with the word scheduled. You can't do it. We've tried to for many, many years, and we failed miserably. The truth is that, you know, we can't have a scenario where, whether we want to or not, we can't have a scenario where, hey, Joe, who is the VMware administrator, you know, 24/7, 365, takes 2.5 hours out of every Tuesday and reviews the firewall logs. And he doesn't do it again until next Tuesday. And he doesn't do it again until the Tuesday after that. We can't look at our vulnerabilities, whether they're internal, external, or between the two, and say, let's just look once a month, and we'll do all of the remediation of those patches and vulnerabilities once a month. We can't look at our cloud implementation and do it just one-off every time we need a server. We need to follow a methodology and do it the right way every time. And again, it comes back to that thought process of being scheduled. The bad guys, you know, Steve has made the point more than once, the bad guys are hitting you at Friday at 6:02, right? Or Sunday at 5:59 a.m. You know, they're not doing a schedule, and they're hoping and praying and depending on the fact that all of us continue to use that scheduled methodology, because for them, all they got to do is find the chinks in that scheduling armor, and they're in like Flynn. So adapting and imparting that continuous thought process to not only your day-to-day operations from a preparatory standpoint, but also a security posture, allows us to make sure that we're watching that door that's ajar, and we're doing it in such a way to prevent these folks from getting in and doing the bad things.
Yeah. Nicely put. So then the last two items on this bulleted list, vulnerability management and remediation, I want to drill into that a second, because, you know, part of this, we're leveraging the Arctic Wolf platform and the managed risk services to identify what the vulnerabilities are. But what I talk about a lot with customers is that, you know, you don't improve your risk score if you just know what's wrong. You only improve your risk score if you fix what's wrong, right? And that the point that I want to make to people is that that's included in this package. So when you talk about the Mdrm SOC Plus program, we're talking about remediating vulnerabilities. We're talking about actually lowering your risk. And so with confidence, it's easy to say that I am absolutely certain that this package will lower your risk because we're remediating those vulnerabilities. And I just want to reflect backwards onto one of the stats that we've talked about a lot in previous webinars, Tim, and mentioned on this one. 99% of attacks are on known vulnerabilities. We're going to fix those vulnerabilities. We're going to first find them. We're going to fix them. And that's kind of all bundled, rolled in together. And I think this is an incredible benefit to end users of this program. And then the last item is the cyber incident response. And again, this ties back to philosophically to the slide that we had, but also to the question about, you know, getting in trouble and causing more harm as we try to recover from a ransomware attack. If something bad is going to happen, if we can put ourselves in a worse position even by trying to do the right thing and just get back in business quickly. Practice, but all the incident response, including the forensics. So we talk about being able to isolate devices, but also preserve data and preserve log files and correlate events and do all of those things. And we've talked about this at large before, Tim, you know, bringing in forensics experts and positioning them, arming them with the information to know what's happened and what's available from a data standpoint, and already having that knowledge available is going to make that process very efficient. So very, very exciting from that standpoint. And the last thing I'll say about incident response is that leveraging the NIST 861, I think it's version 2 of that specific standard that talks about incident response and outlines the stages and steps to go through. And there's also an incident response checklist. And that's basically what the program follows. But I wanted to toggle through a couple of things, because tying this model back to those goals that we spoke about, the first objective or goal is prevent ransomware from happening to begin with. And I would say that that would be a successful outcome, right? And one of the ways that we do that is by having 24/7 eyes on glass. We'll catch the intruders quickly. It takes time for them to navigate their way through the network and find the crown jewels, right? Find that valuable data. What is it that's going to make you pay? And the other prevention that we do is just fixing those vulnerabilities, right? That's how they're getting in. If an exploitable vulnerability, they have to find an exploitable vulnerability to get in your network anyway. So, and then from a minimized standpoint, if somebody clicks on a link, for example, a phishing email, downloads a payload to their laptop or desktop, being able to isolate that device from the network, just stop all inbound or outbound traffic right away. That's a huge benefit, right? Because then the damage is related to that device as well. This can happen like right now, that instead of not 2 days later, not 10 days later, right? We can do something about it right now. And if we're, again, the combination of this is where the magic really happens. Having 24/7 eyes on glass, seeing those IOCs being tripped as things are happening, and taking an action immediately, I think is paramount. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about the maturity of not just having an incident response plan that outlines the roles and responsibilities that everyone has inside or outside of your organization, but also practicing, right? So including a tabletop in the package, I think is paramount. And these are things that will position people to not have to pay the ransom, right? If you never get ransomware, you never have to pay the ransom. That's for sure, right? Anyway, just keep moving, Tim, because we're from a time standpoint. I wanted to just mention the Gartner maturity model, and Gartner took the time to say, hey, if you have a modern SOC, you ought to have these things. They're all included, and this, which is phenomenal, right? But the point I wanted to make is that if somebody were to do this package, then you automatically catapult yourself to a 4+ maturity level right away in this model that's designed to evaluate these things, right? Just by virtue of doing them in a best-in-class way. So I think that's paramount. And then the key points I wanted to go through, Tim, just really are related to, and just so everybody knows, we'll send this information out so you can come back to these things. But they're all related to, we're experiencing, I'll say, an event in our industry, right? There's a shortage of talent. Enterprises are challenged by resources, both headcount and expertise. And so one of the keys that I see all the time is being to position yourself to do these things, to achieve those goals, is to basically outsource, right? That's, if you don't have the expertise, leverage somebody else's expertise and make sure you have the right expertise doing the right job. So I don't think we can go through all of those just in spirit of the time, because I have a couple of questions. But key takeaways from this, that we talk about the total solution thing: leverage the information that you already have, focusing on the foundational elements of security. And you said it very well, Tim, and I think that's important for people to understand. If you do the foundational things well, bad things are less likely to happen. In fact, risk equals likelihood times impact, right? And so from a goal standpoint, if we look at just lowering both of those, right, by virtue of this program, then the inevitable outcome is for risk, to improve your risk score ultimately, right? So what I tell as a key takeaway, and this I tell people all the time, and I don't mind saying it here: if you only have the budget to do one thing in security, do this, right? Because this is going to address a lot of those fundamental security issues. It's going to create 24/7 eyes on glass, and it's going to do a lot of the things to prevent putting you in a position where you have to pay a ransom ever. So hopefully that's meaningful. I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to get to a couple of these questions. And the first one, Tim, I'll just ask to you. So hold on, let me just scroll through these real quick. What is the one most important thing that you can do to prevent yourself from getting ransomware?
Diligence. We've said it multiple times, but diligence is the key. if we don't make assumptions about how we're going to get attacked, we just look for any way that we could be attacked, we're going to be much better off. Trying to think ahead and look for specifics is probably going to lead us down the wrong path. We just need to look everywhere. Broad visibility is the word that or the phrase we typically use at Arctic Wolf is, that's the key, is broad visibility.
Yep. Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have somebody watching the store 24/7. I think that's a critical element of it, and minimizing the damage if something bad is going to happen. And full confession, I'm not I don't click on links ever. I always mouse over them. I always avoid doing that. And it was a Saturday. I was in the office, and for whatever reason, I just clicked on it. And as soon as I did it, I knew it was a bad idea. I said, "Oh crap." Popped my laptop off the docking station thinking I was going to disconnect myself from the network immediately. And then I noticed I must have had auto connect on because it connected to the wireless network right away. And I was like, oh crap. So I powered the laptop down. But what I was trying to do was minimize the impact. And whether I didn't even know if I had anything. I can't emphasize the importance of this enough. In real time, being able to do that through a service, right, that's watching and knows whether or not there's an impact and isolates your device immediately. You don't even have to pop your laptop off the docking station. You can eliminate the traffic coming in and out of that immediately. It's key. A couple minutes over. I got a few questions I'm going to try to plow through. Is there any way to completely eliminate the possibility of ransomware? What do you think?
Absolutely not.
That's why we want to minimize the impact, right? As priority number 2.
Exactly.
And I think that's exactly why we want to do it. How does the cloud security posture management work, Tim?
Yeah, so it's integrating the information from those cloud elements along with the rest of your deployment methodology, whether that be remote users or on-prem data. Doing it in such a way as we're watching for security changes, we're looking for failed logins, geopositional data. There are quite a few different things that do that. And one of the simplest ones is maintaining and understanding that you need to make sure you're focused on a traditional and approved methodology for rolling out those assets. So the actual configuration methodology needs to be followed as well and monitored.
Yep. And I think a key point is the fact that it's continuing monitoring the configuration of your cloud device. And if you do something silly, or if, this is a common thing that we see all the time, right? Spinning up new devices, spinning them down, spinning them up, not putting any of the security controls in place. We can monitor for that and identify when that's happening. Do you, and just a couple more questions here. I know we're over on time already. Do you monitor agentless devices? Any response to that?
Yeah, 100%. And truthfully speaking, that's something that everybody should be doing, right? Greater than 50% of the new exploits that are out there are leveraging things that nobody watches, right? There's lots and lots of EDR solutions. There's lots and lots of agent-based solutions out there from a cybersecurity standpoint. But, when the bad guys, again, they pivot, right? They recognize where we're focusing. If we're not watching the printers, the scanners, the IoT devices, the HVAC systems, the appliances, if we're not aware of and monitoring those, the bad guys are going to leverage those to do that penetration. So there was a recent hack up at Honda in Marysville, not too far down the road from my house here. And they took over control systems on their manufacturing line. So it wasn't the Windows boxes or the Linux boxes or the traditional entry points. They attacked their control systems.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that it's a multi-pronged approach to really keeping eyes on the store, right? Not just putting agents on the system, but putting in network traffic analysis, user behavior analysis. All of those things collectively together I think, make a total solution, right? If you leave something out, and this, I think you made this point earlier, Tim, if you leave something out, the bad guys are going to find out a way to exploit that, right? So
100%.
just making sure those bases covered. We have additional questions. We're already way over on time. So just in the spirit of being respectful for people's time, I think that we should probably wrap it up, and we'll send these out as part of the follow-up responses, just all the questions with responses to them. But I just wanted to thank you, Tim. Just it's always a pleasure, and I really enjoy our opportunities to have an open discussion this way. And thank everybody that was an attendee today, and thank you for your time and sharing and things like that. So thank you very much. I hope we helped you in some way. Position yourself to not get ransomware. God bless, and please give us a call if you have additional questions or those kind of things.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good one.